Welcome to Fintech Chatter, presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. Follow us on your favorite podcast player or Fintech Chatter TV on YouTube.
Hello and welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show for everything fintech down under. I'm your host Dexter Cousins, and today I've got a really special show lined up, at least special for me anyway. It's the 4th anniversary of the very first episode of Fintech Chatter. Yes, on this day, the 7th of November 2019, we launched our first episode. And here to celebrate and talk through the last 4 years of Fintech Chatter, I'm joined by a special guest, my good friend, Ryan Edwards-Pritchard from Cape. Ryan, welcome back.
Good to be here. Many happy returns.
Thank you very much, my friend. We've got some very good memories for me to go through today. But we're going to do something a little bit different. I think you're going to kind of interview me rather than me interview you. But before we do that, Ryan, do you want to tell our listeners who might not be familiar with Cape what you're all about?
Yeah, sure. So Cape is a expense management platform that issues corporate cards that are designed to help small business owners in Australia save time when it comes to bookkeeping, accounting, general business administration, and save the money, most importantly. So doing things like codifying your expense policy into the payment rails so your employees always adhere to your actual policy. Who reads them these days? And as well as just helping save you money on things like FX with access to free FX. So that's what we do.
Cool stuff. Well, I guess, over to you to kick off the show then, eh?
To start, for listeners that can't see Dexter Cousins right now, he's directly in front of me. He's sweating.
Yeah.
And he knows that I'm going to go all
I've got a sweat on. I do have a sweat on.
I'm going Jeremy Paxman on you.
Yeah.
You sit down. You ready for a grilling?
I am ready for a grilling.
This is where we flip the script and we go from gamekeeper turned poacher in this scenario. So I've been looking forward to this opportunity for some time. Now, I'm obviously teasing you. It is an honor to sit here and to kind of look back in terms of the last 4 years and really just try and understand the story, the genesis in terms of where it all started, first of all. So you mentioned November 2019.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst? What was it that brought this to fruition?
Great question. And I probably would go back to October 2018 and Cybos. It was in Sydney. And I met with some really cool people. You might know Dave Cunningham.
Good old Dave.
Yeah, Dave.
Absolutely.
And connected with Dave. And look, we kind of immediately struck up a friendship. And at the time I was writing a blog and was featuring founders of fintech. And instead of doing a podcast, I'd literally sit in a room like this with them. We'd have this kind of conversation and I would record it and then I would go away and I would transcribe it and I'd write a blog. And Dave said, why don't you do a podcast like 11FS? You see what those guys do. And of course, I was a big fan of the show. And Dave knew all the guys there. And he kind of encouraged me to do it. And I kept threatening to do it for the course of the next 12 months. And eventually, had planned to go and do just another blog interview. Was with Anthony Nance at Wiser at the time. And I sat there and had the iPhone kind of sat between us, mic on record, and recorded it. And it was actually Halloween and he was dressed in a Darth Vader costume and there was loads of stuff going on. It was like a big party and so there was a load of noise and the sound quality was terrible. But it was actually a really good interview and it was about 15, 16 minutes long. And I just said, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to put it out there. And I'd been so kind of hesitant because you've seen all the gear that I've got, a bit of a perfectionist.
Some setup.
I wanted it to be perfect, sound perfect, and it didn't. It sounded terrible. And look, I just put it out there and it was really well received. And then I didn't do another one until I think the end of January 2020. So it was almost like, 2 or 3 months before the next one. But look, that next one, I just thought, how do we get traction?
Well, just out of interest, what was going from that initial, what was the trepidation? Like, it was one thing to make that first step, which is amazing because lots of people talk about doing this.
Yeah.
Very few actually do it. Well, I say that these days, it feels like everybody does a bloody podcast. Hand up. But still going from the first one to then the second and it becoming a, quote unquote, a thing.
Yeah.
Like what went on?
So I'd done the first one and I was going back to the UK actually in December and had organised and got David Breer from 11FS to be the second guest, and we were going to record it live at 11FS offices in London. We couldn't do it in the end, kind of schedules got in the way.
He fobbed you off?
Yeah.
Oh, mate, no, not a chance.
Yeah, but look,
I'm obviously teasing in case he listens.
Yeah, but he kind of said, look, still keen to do it. And it was guest number 2, and I kind of took the view that if you're going to do it, just go large. And who better to get as a guest than perhaps the host of the number 1 fintech podcast
I think it is.
in the world, right? Like,
he's
everybody,
one of the OGs.
Everybody listened to it. Back then, I'm sure they still do, but back then, David was still weekly doing the show, and you had Lita and Simon. And he agreed to do it, and we recorded it remotely at the end of January. David was in New York. Put on the headphones. Let's have a listen to that intro, mate. It's kind of embarrassing, right? Here I am talking about sound quality. It's a bit shit. Welcome to the Tier 1 People podcast, Fintech Game Changers. So it's called Fintech Game Changers. And in this episode, we've got a very special guest, David M. Breer, CEO and co-founder of 11FS. What do you think of the kind of deep
David's
house
gonna
vibe?
share with us his insights
It's
on
bit
how to build
2014.
a winning culture, how to bootstrap successfully, and he's even going to bust 1 or 2 startup myths. David, a lot of people would know 11FS for the Fintech Insider podcast, but there's a lot more to the business than just the podcast. Would you be able to share with us a little bit more about what you do?
We've been up to a few things other than just sort of hanging out with microphones and doing podcasts and whatnot. So, over the last 3.5 years, we've built a bank out for NatWest in the UK, a challenger SME bank, which has been called Metal, with a lady called Alison Rose, who's now the CEO.
Alison Rose has been in the news recently.
Over in Hong Kong with both WeLab and
I think I might have missed that one.
Standard Charter.
She resigned.
Singapore with,
There we go.
The Jeremy Corbyn thing.
Oh, God, yeah, of
a number of
course.
different companies in South Africa.
I did see that,
We're midway
actually.
through building out a retail bank over in the US. And really,
So,
what we struck
when I
on,
recorded this, I
sort of 3.5 years
forgot to
ago
plug in the
was
mic.
kind of a thesis that
So I had to
really was
re-record,
so
so I
early
sound
in
really
the
wooden
cycle.
when I'm asking them
The
questions.
promise
It's
of
because I had to actually go
everything that
back
the
and
internet
re-ask
brand to
the
an
question,
industry
but just
that
talking to
fundamentally
myself
hasn't changed for 300 years
edit it in.
was to really move to
Sure,
much
it
more
wasn't
of
just
a
the nerves getting the better of you.
personalised
Meeting your
one-to-one
heroes and
relationship.
all.
It was
Digital
just not
was
having
really
an
about
absolute
using
clue.
all of the
I just
power of the
didn't have an
data to
idea.
create much better experiences, much better services for people. But unfortunately, the way in which big banking organizations have really implemented that was fundamentally just about taking people and paper out of the process. It was all about digital being a justification.
What do you think we are in terms of it? It feels like we're still exactly where David's talking about. We don't seem to have, or banking doesn't seem to have moved on much, eh?
You could be talking about it today and it'd
Yeah.
be the same thing.
Yeah.
Which is alarming, but also encouraging if you're a fintech or a digital bank.
Globally, that's happened both in the regulatory space, but also the competition landscape fundamentally changing. New players coming into this space, whether it's fintech or whether it's massive technology companies, who are really showing that people just want better services. If you provide good capability to people, then you find that actually they're much more loyal, they have much better relationships, and actually they're probably much more forgiving when things go wrong.
Yeah, mate. So first of all, Fintech Game Changers. I mean, what a lame title for a podcast.
Hey, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, we've had 3 names now. We're Fintech Game Changers. We got the Fintech Australia podcast, which we'll talk about in a minute, and Fintech Chatter. So I've been mouthing off recently saying, kind of when in a downturn, there's two types of CEOs, one who changes the logo and one who changes the name, the business, right?
Oh, sorry.
And here I am changing the name of the podcast 3 times.
Hey, I mean, one of my funnest memories in terms of name change and just lameness was that fateful, I think, meeting when we were at the Opera House.
Oh, mate, when was that? Was
that
it Thrive?
Oh, no, it was even better than that. So for those that don't know, Cape, a little bit like Fintech Chatter, has had many different names.
Yeah.
And the original name was, it wasn't Thrive. It was Bunce.
Bunce, that's it, and I did the David Brent thing here. What's the Bunce? Bunce and Burner, nice little...
Oh, God. That has literally stayed with me. And I've had to explain that story to a number of different people. So for people that don't know, I thought, Bunce is English slang for money. And I thought it was a bit of a cute name, bit different, bit edgy. And then played this out to Dexter, and his initial response was... Bunce, as in Ricky Gervais from The Office. Bunsen burner, nice little earner. I was like, oh my God. Okay, scrap that. Move on to the next one. So anyway, but putting that aside, you're not the only one. And you've played a role in terms of our naming convention, but you went from that to from the Game Changers, and then there was something in between before you got to Fintech Chatter.
Well, I mean, this was really what I would say was kind of the next kind of major leap in the podcast. So I think I'd maybe recorded 4 or 5 episodes, and at the time I'd had my podcast out. Duncan Curry had a podcast before me as well, which I think did about 20 episodes, which is really cool, and I was a guest on that, and that was kind of another kind of prompt for me to do my podcast as well. And then Fintech Australia had also released a podcast, and I think it might have been the week before we went into lockdown. And I was in Melbourne, caught up with Rebecca Shotcupby, who at the time was CEO of Fintech Australia. She basically had said, hey, how are you getting all these great guests on? We're doing a podcast. It's pretty tough, isn't it? Yep. She said, how about if we combined forces? And look, it just made a lot of sense. I already had a great relationship with them. There was then the kind of kudos that came with the partnership with the kind of governing body of fintech in Australia, the credibility that comes with it, as well as then just the distribution out through kind of their networks as well as mine. And we kind of had a kind of on the back of a napkin, and we kind of called it the Fintech Australia podcast. Still produced, kind of owned by me, but they took the name, and we kind of had a partnership that was only 12 months. But we did so much in that 12 months. It was just incredible. Went from recording a show, I think, once every 4 weeks to 6 weeks to 2 shows a week. And we went into lockdown, and that period of lockdown was really, I think, the catalyst for the show taking off, because we'd gone from this environment where we'd all be at the startup hub. I mean, look at like what were our days like? Before lockdown, we were at the startup hub nearly every day, and we're hundreds of coffees in like 3 months. The first 3 months you were here, and then all of that just disappeared. And like, how did you keep connected? And so we had the communication piece wasn't there, but then you had everybody freaking out and going, "What's happening?" Right? We were going through all of us a very, very stressful period. And I think there was a real fear, and certainly the discussions that I was having with Rebecca at the time, is we were deeply, deeply concerned that this would massively set back the industry a number of years. And all the work that we'd done and everybody had done to get to this point was about to go under. And so we kind of just committed to let every bit of good news, every capital raise, let's just invite them on the podcast and get it out there. And so that kind of traction start to really kind of take off, and to the point where I think we got to episode 20, and I think I got to episode 20 in twice the speed that it took to get to episode 1 to 4. So it was kind of relentless, and I was sitting in my kind of son's bedroom, at the time, because we're all trying to figure out, where do kids do schoolwork and where do I do work, and and eventually I kind of moved the studio into my walk-in wardrobe and was like recording, shows where my kind of underwear drawer was like a foot away from the mic or whatever.
What a delightful picture, just to for our listeners.
Yeah, amazing, eh? So that was kind of the early days, and then that Fintech Australia partnership. Some of the other cool stuff that we did was, we had the Finnies. So we did the People's Choice Award, which we did together for 3 years. I got a little bit of a clip of that. So this was a bit of a different kind of show. Again, dodgy music.
Classic. Seems to follow you around, Dexter.
Yeah, well, look, that's my other thing is that's my other thing is just, I enjoy making music. So kind of the shit that you hear on this show is all done by me.
I'm Dexter Cousins, and I'm joined by Catherine McCall.
You can check the sound quality is way better.
To tell you why you should vote for Bright. Welcome to the show, Catherine, and congrats to everyone at Bright for making it as finalists to this year's Finnies.
Hi, Dexter. Thanks so much for having me. It's such a huge honour to be nominated for FinTech Organisation of the Year.
So what we did was the finalists for each of the categories, where there was, I think, about 8 or 10. They got 15 minutes to pitch. We recorded it as a podcast. Everybody got asked the same questions. And so we, whoever got the most amount of downloads and you could vote as well was classed the winner.
2015 started Bright. So sole founder, sole CEO. So it's been a roller coaster of a journey. And
perhaps one of the most democratic processes, not just whoever my mate is gets the award. It's actually quite fair. It's as fair and balanced a way as possible.
Yeah, look, and kind of there's ways for us to check if there's any cheating going on as well. Which we did have a couple of finalists kind of engage outsourcing places where we got listeners from 100 massive following in Kazakhstan and
Uzbekistan.
Yeah, all these weird and wonderful
region.
Places. Yeah.
This problem by removing the upfront cost, by providing a fast, convenient and affordable payment option and spreading that purchase cost over time. We're also solving this problem for the vendor that sells these home improvements and solar products to the customer. We're giving them credit assurance on the spot, and we're also providing them with a cash flow solution so they can get paid as soon as the job's done. In addition to that, we're solving the problem of carbon emissions and greenhouse gas. So by people putting solar on their roof and generating their own energy, we're also making the world a much cleaner place. Oh, thank you so much, Dexter. Really great to be given the opportunity to speak about Bright, and I'm really looking forward to the FinTech.
Check out the music.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Catherine.
I think we've gone back another 2 decades. That it feels like,
it's like Miami Vice. Yeah, Miami Vice. I kind of was inspired by Miami Vice. Check it out.
Oh.
Yeah, so there you go. That was the People's Choice Award, which was we ran from first one was 2020. 2021, 2022. So the first year that we did it, recorded 40 podcast interviews in 2 weeks. And I don't know how the hell we did it, but first big shout out to Jo, my wife, who did an amazing job of just coordinating it all and kind of set it up. And then, Lisa, Rayan, Rebecca, Jazz at Fintech Australia. It was just relentless. And we got them all recorded, published, did the awards, all within the space of 2 weeks. So it was a massive effort. And look, the reason it came about was I think that was the first awards that we had to do remotely.
Yeah.
And obviously everybody had a really tough time. And we thought, look, how do we just kind of celebrate founders and give everybody just the, kind of a moment, 15 minutes on the stage, just so that we could kind of show them some recognition. That was a really cool thing. And then I think one of the other highlights, and we might have just finished the partnership at this point, but was Intersect 2021 and the whole event was amazing. But at the after party, I basically went around with the mic. So let's just have a quick listen to that.
Where was the after party?
It was on the banks of the Yarra.
All right.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the bar, but it was an amazing night, just fantastic, an amazing 2 days.
Am I expecting Miami Vice music again?
No Miami Vice music. I think
okay.
it's just, but it's the sound quality. There's obviously lots of talking in the background.
It's been huge, right? And I think what's just been incredible is how much it's evolved in the 18 months since we were last here in Melbourne for Intersect 2019.
Well, I think, the word that everyone keeps telling me is the maturity factor.
Yeah.
I think over the last 18 months, the sector has really matured, and we continue to see that not only with the Finny Award entrants, but we're seeing that again, time and time again, and so Intersect is a great example of that.
Yeah, and it's, I think, characterised by fewer T-shirts and more jackets and suits, right?
So many more jackets and so many more suits, but less banks this year, ironically.
Yeah. What's been the highlight for you?
Lee Hatton on stage yesterday morning was pretty impressive. The highlight for me is probably this after party right now. Just looking at the room, there's still over 300 people here tonight. And, the faces, everyone's talking about how great Intersect was, how well produced the content
Funny story here. A few days later, and the Patona Advocate was a parody skit of how, and I think this is based on something that I'd put on LinkedIn, where I'd compared Intersect to Woodstock.
Oh my God.
And there was a whole parody article in the Patona Advocate, which, kind of I'm taken as a, kind of my moment of stardom.
People through the doors over the last 2 days, which is incredible. But I think the highlight in terms of was the opening drinks last night.
Yeah.
The energy in the room at the Hyatt was unbelievable.
Yeah.
There was over 500 people there for that event alone.
Yeah. And what does this mean for the industry? Because it is now an industry, right? We're not a community or an ecosystem.
Yeah. Ironically, in every speech I've given this week, it's been either the fintech sector or the fintech industry, so you actually hit the nail on the head.
There you go. Hey,
seems to be advocating more so that, or suggesting that, it seems to be suggesting that most of the stuff happens at the after party or at the drinks. Is that the case at Intersect? I mean, I've only been to one, and as a non-drinker, I feel like I might be missing out here.
Look, the 2019, the VIP party was amazing. I think anybody that was there will say, like, it's probably one of the highlights of the industry, FinTech Australia industry. It was just an incredible night. I think Intersect 2021 was incredible because we'd had 12 months of lockdown, and it was so fortuitous because actually the week after that event in Melbourne went back into lockdown. So
that was the longest lockdown in history, I think it was, from memory.
Yeah, it was. So it was kind of really fortuitous that we got this little window, and as Rebecca said, like, the energy was just incredible, and it was a great event, and we were also at the very height of the kind of
what, the fintech bubble?
Not the bubble doesn't have height, does it? It's like
sorry. I mean, we
were
can
at
talk
the
about these things.
height of the kind of investment kind of rounds, and
the go-go days of 2020 and 2021.
Yeah. So look, that kind of there was an amazing 12 months that we had with FinTech Australia, and then look, we kind of moved in different directions very amicably. For me, it was kind of it was a big investment. I'm trying to run a business at the same time, and
I mean, are we talking about amicably like a Lennon and Paul McCarthy type of
no, like it was super
ways?
amicable, because we still kind of kept the partnership with the People's Choice Awards, so that ran for another two years from that point. But it was just commercially, it's like a podcast, almost like a hobby, right? And it was starting to turn into this big monster that I was just like, look, it's kind of overtaking tier one people, and I need to focus on that business. But what I thought we could do now, Ryan, maybe talk about some of the kind of, I guess, what the listeners have, and I'm judging this on downloads, but the top 3 shows that we've had
Go on. Where do we start? What's numero uno, my friend?
We should start with numero uno. This one, I'm actually really pleased this is number one because it's kind of a really big advert for tier one people. But it's with Matt Baxby from Revolut, episode 88, building a global super app. We placed Matt, and this was recorded, I think, just a month or so after he'd been in the global CEO role for a 12-month period interim. So it was a kind of bit of kudos for the Aussie fintech scene and Aussie fintech talent that we've got somebody who's at the other end of the world chosen. But let's have a hear from Matt.
Yeah, I think in some ways, being offered the opportunity, and I agreed to do it for an interim period, was going to be a bit shorter, and as these things tend to roll, it's been sort of 10 or 11 months. But in some ways, a silver lining of COVID, because I don't think an Aussie sitting in his wardrobe in Brisbane, I'm sitting in my wardrobe because that's where I work.
I was going to say the sound quality's fantastic.
would be presented with an opportunity.
He's probably a foot away from his underwear drawer as well.
A huge amount, and probably some of the key things that I've sort of reflected on in the last 11 months while I've sitting in that, and it covered sort of Revolut's 7 major markets across the US, UK, East and Western Europe. We've got a presence in markets in Japan and Singapore and Australia, and looking at, as I said, rolling into APAC and Latin America. But this idea that there's a tidal wave of change that's upon us, and every market without exception is being disrupted, and it's fintech and neobanks that are filling the void. Case studies in new markets like Brazil, where new banks hit 35 million customers, or Paytm in India, which has in excess of 300 million customers. Yeah. And I think that story is being better understood by investors. Capital's being attracted, and as a result, they've now got the ammunition to really take incumbent banks on. So there's sort of this tidal wave.
Am I right in thinking he's still there in terms of, and that's what now, kind of 3-4 years on?
Nearly 4 years,
and that, by the way, it's not meant as at all in terms of anything other than just kudos to him, because the tenure of senior execs at the top echelons in terms of fintech such as them, it ain't long.
Yeah,
it's a pretty short shelf life. So I don't know much about him, but frankly, he must be doing something right.
Well, I think obviously. But I think it's kind of for me. It's and when I've looked at the the data that we've got, 95% of the people that we place stay with the business more than 2 years. Which, when you consider the clients that we're working with, which are high growth businesses, that 2 years, if you're talking corporate years, it's what, like 10 years
Classically,
equivalent.
It's dog years.
Yeah,
you can absolutely extrapolate it out in a similar way.
Yeah, and so I think kind of it's a testament. Not only is it a high profile role, but for me, it's just testament to the kind of level of thoroughness that we have when we're approaching talent, and just making sure that it's we're so transparent that everybody knows what they're getting into, but also that we're doing our due diligence around them being the right type of person that's going to be right for that environment with those resources, and can move with the business as well. It's just such a challenge, right?
Well, this is it. It's one thing to bring in somebody as an interim solution for solving a problem at that particular point in time, but it's something completely different to have somebody that has the growth trajectory that can match the aspirations of a business like Revolut, which is
and look, Matt was doing he was brought in to do the Oz country CEO role, and kind of did that interim position as well at the same time. So and look, really interestingly, I think Australia, New Zealand's now kind of the playbook for Revolut launching into other regions, right? So it's kind of one of the few genuine instances out there where this premise that we have of Australia being the launch pad for international businesses into Asia has actually come true.
Yeah, no, I think they've done a fantastic job in terms of doing that and showcasing it to the rest of the industry.
Guess what number 2 was in our all-time listened to podcasts?
I'd struggle to think. Surprise me.
So do you remember just over 3 years ago when you were living Shelley Beach.
Oh, yeah.
And I had this great idea that we should record a podcast in Manly outside.
With all the elements
yeah,
against
and
us. What a great idea.
Yeah. And at the time, you were in stealth mode, so we couldn't really talk about Cape or bunts. or whatever it was called, Thriver. Yeah.
There was another one, Pally.
Yeah.
I forgot about that one. Yeah.
So whatever it was at that point. So we couldn't talk about that. But what we did was, one of the things I enjoyed doing was a bit like this compilation show where I kind of brought together the interviews that I'd done that month or that were around a theme, and we did kind of SME lending, business banking as a theme,
talking about Prosper and Judah.
Should we have a quick listen to it? Mate, you're gonna. This is how. Check out how green you were.
Enthusiastic,
Ryan,
I imagine.
welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's awesome to be here. I have to say, being a long time listener, all 12 months.
I'd only been running 6 months.
It's pretty cool to be able to actually sit across and talk all things.
Gobshite.
Jesus, caught me out. Cheers, mate.
What brings you to these shows?
Well, like many good stories, mine actually started with a friend's wedding actually coming over here the end of last year. To kind of give some background and context, prior to coming over, the last decade or so for me was all spent in software consulting, financial services. Specifically, the last 4 years that are relevant to this show in particular were actually spent running as the managing director, a company called Funding Options, which is a one-stop shop for all things business finance. The equivalent to over here is probably Valiant, which I'm sure you guys probably know more than well. I had, an incredible journey, seeing the company go from 5 to 100 people, as is the case when you go through that growth. Well, wore every single hat going across engineering, product design, commercial, operations. I think towards the end, my role was
Didn't say I was any good at them,
focused on building partnerships, specifically with the incumbent banks, and helping them better serve their small business customers. So the likes of ING, Starling Bank, Metro, TSB in particular, we were providing them with a marketplace lending solution.
So, what kind of memories does that bring back?
Seamlessly.
Feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
Listening to that is insane. There's a lot of context there that's missed in terms of I guess the journey from then and actually the backdrop of the reality of where I was and what was kind of going through, because it was the pandemic, it was lockdowns, and actually, a slight nod, but I'd say it was, again, fortuitous, to use your words. I had a thesis that Australia was the perfect place to start, to then expand and look into the APAC region. And I think that's largely still true. But it's been an interesting journey over the last 3 years. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the greenness and freshness in terms of approach. It's one thing observing from the outside the market, the ecosystem, and then it's a very different experience being on the ground and actually getting on with it.
I think this is you talking about all the stuff you've been doing.
Valiant, Bo over at Prosper, Nick over at Afterpay. And they've really blown me away in terms of what they're doing and what they've achieved. And then on top of that, it's been really encouraging to see the activity from the VCs. So the likes of Airtree, Blackbird, Square.
You were definitely brown nosing for some investment with that phrase.
Didn't really take me that far.
So
Thanks, guys.
Since January,
Appreciate it.
I've been working on a new project. Spent the last 8 months head down, really trying to get my head around a new market. I'm brand new to this space. So the best thing I could do is go out there. There's obviously Moolah, there's others that are here, but there is a new opportunity. And I think if you look globally, where for me, taking the time out to really try and research and understand the market, where the opportunity is, not just in Australia, but across the APAC region, it's looking at this first entry point in terms of working capital. And,
is that where you ended up?
No, didn't end up there. Like all good plans, you start off with something and it takes you in a very, very different direction.
Yeah.
And I'd say, God, like the twists and turns that we've kind of gone through in terms of, and the iterations. And I'm sure if there are other startup founders or just general people who work in startups, you'll feel this on a daily basis. You'll have one idea that this is what you're going to go out there and build. But frankly, like the ground underneath your feet is shifting at such a pace, like you're just trying to keep track of it.
Hey, we've got a beautiful transition here. So we're talking about the top 3 podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. The third one was Lee Hatton from Afterpay, but it also contains what we're going to move on to next, which are some of my kind of favorite moments from the podcast.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
What are we in for?
We're in for a bit of singing here.
Stop it.
Let's get Lee up.
The team that I worked with in Eubank, they were obsessive about getting it right for the customer. And our mantra was always just the bank you need and nothing you don't, right? And so we were just obsessed with this simplicity. And I was very fortunate. Andrew Thorburn, who was the CEO of the NAB Group, he just gave us such autonomy and flexibility to be able to drive a customer value proposition that was so unique and so different to the NAB Group. And, you know, it had many lovers and haters is probably the best way to put it. And we would often...
I think that's every neobank out there, isn't it?
and we used to have this song as a team. I get knocked down, but I get up again. Yeah. You're never going to keep me down. And that was kind of all...
The first and only person to sing on the podcast, Lee Hatton.
Amazing
like I said, powerful.
Yeah. I tell you what, she's an incredible person. Like, energy of Lee is just amazing.
I can feel it on this side of the microphone.
So that in itself... culture made the difference, right? Like we had a very unique culture for the group. Our engagement scores were always right at the top of the pack. They were world-class over those 5 years. And, you know, that in itself we were particularly proud of because entrepreneurship, which is, you know, this, you know, absolute desire to be a group
That's
of
not Kiwi entrepreneurship. It's actually entrepreneur.
It's just such a hard thing to achieve. And so you've got to have guts
that got bandied around quite a lot.
But to do that, you've got to engage the hearts and minds.
3-4 years ago, I think when everybody was going off to become founders.
Yeah, it's the innovation labs.
Like, come on, no, hold on here. We'll hold on to you. And obviously, it just seems to have died down a little bit in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it has.
Is that because retention now, everybody's trying to basically hold on and question whether they really want to go out into the world to go start their own thing?
I just think, you know, it's just trends, right? It's just buzzwords. Something else comes up that, you know, people want to latch onto.
Here we go. Question.
Yeah.
Last 4 years, give me your top 3 favorite buzzwords.
Ubiquitous is everywhere, literally.
There we go. Yes.
So ubiquitous, I think, is kind of 3. So I'll go in descending order.
Yeah.
Frictionless. I don't know what that actually means.
I mean, I'd assume that this is probably some founder talking about or product person talking about the supposed frictionless journey.
Yeah.
Of which, what, like, actually, objectively, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
And yeah,
my all-time favorite, though, I think is the most abused word in fintech, is democratization, which basically equates to, if you translate it in startup and VC land, how the fuck do we exploit people as much as we possibly can?
Oh, God.
In poor countries.
There is always, there is a, unfortunately, correlation between that word and what usually is the meaning behind it.
Yeah.
But yeah, some interesting verbiage.
Yeah.
In terms of what you feel around there. Anything in terms of just also put the verbs aside. On the flip side, just trends. You've seen a fair few trends in the last 4 years. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just intrigued just to see what you come out with as a well-seasoned commentator on the fintech space.
It didn't make the cut for the clips, but one of my highlights was at the end of 2021. I decided to start a video of the podcast, and I did a kind of essentially, you know, an end of year review for 2021, and there was 4 of us: Ben Ford, Bosco Tan, Rebecca Shot-Guppy, right?
Yes.
And we kind of sat there and we just talked about the year. And looking back at that, you can go and find the video on YouTube. it's embarrassing. Like, if you want to see kind of what we'd become and fallen into in the hype cycle, we were like, yeah, it's going to be Web3 and yeah, it's crypto. And it's 6 months later, right, it starts the wheels start to come off. And I think it was I think obviously the Web3 thing, that was probably the biggest hype wave. And then obviously, I think, and somebody put this beautifully, it was actually Greg McKenna, who's the CEO of Police Bank, who was on the show a couple of months back. And he said, and I think it's a really pertinent point and something we talked about earlier. The days of building a successful business, whether you're an Uber or you're Zip or an Afterpay, based on regulatory arbitrage is over. And I think that's the reality, right? Like, there was this window where the regulators couldn't keep up and you could go and build a business, and you had like a 7 to 10 year period. Anyway, mate, let's move on.
Yes, sorry.
Next highlight, fellow Northeasterner.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, Anthony Thompson. This is actually not my highlight, but my boy Harry, who listened to the show, used to listen to it at bedtime, so you could hear his dad talk at night.
He's a bit of an OG.
Yeah.
Thompson, eh?
Yeah, he is. But anyway, this is Harry's favourite moment from the podcast ever.
Is he talking about the tune?
He's not, no.
Oh, okay, no. Right, fine.
Finally, any plans to go back to the UK, or is Australia home for you?
Well, I think that's a question of whether the Australian government would keep me. Certainly my wife and I loved living here, but...
You've been there.
There is.
I'm still here.
And where can people go if they want to find out more about
this is Harry's favourite bit.
Go to www.86400.com.au, or we're very active on social media, or get in touch with me.
Just to confirm, everybody, that's 864000.
Well done, Dexter.
Not quite.
86400. We'll keep this. So I came up with 86,400.
Number of seconds in a day.
Oh, Dexter. You could have edited that one out, mate.
On the show. Thank you so much. And we'd love to get you back on at some point.
It's been a pleasure, Dexter. I'd love to come back. Thank you.
Another music.
It's a theme that's just followed you around for the last 4 years, Dexter. This fine taste of music. Intro and outro tunes.
Yeah.
Where to next?
Well, mate, I mean, 86,400. It sounds like a Terminator model, doesn't it? Eh?
It's a bit of a mouthful. Yeah. I thought 86,400 was a mouthful when it first came out, but fair play to them. I mean, landing here, what are we talking about now? Is it 2.5 years ago in terms of when they exited?
Yeah, so it would have been early, I think March 2001, and then the actual...
That's incredible.
I think the kind of integration
at the top
piece...
of the hype cycle as well.
Yeah, the integration piece, I think, was September... Would have been 2 years ago, actually. So I remember I was recruiting for them for that integration piece.
Am I right in thinking 86,400 was part of like a spin out from Cuscal in terms of...
Yeah.
Fair play to them. And Snakes and Ladders as a game... Yeah, in terms of 86,400 one end, are all pals over at Zinger in terms of the other end.
Yeah.
Like all within the same, I think it was like the same month.
It was crazy. I mean, the media attention on it was, it was labelled a failure. Hold on a second. In 3 years, they've got a 300 mil exit. They've built a bank from nothing, which was actually a first class bank, right? Now I remember first neobank in the world to offer home loans. So it was pretty spectacular, I think.
Head of, fair play to them. So, I mean, doth our cap to Anthony Thompson there in terms of the job that he and the Cuscal crew did and how they managed to exit when they did. Fair play.
Some other notable mentions was Gareth Gumbley from Frollo at the time came on the show and had just done the first ever data transfer. CDR went live. That was kind of like
the promise.
I'd liken that to the kind of fintech's Neil Armstrong moment of walking on the moon. Hasn't quite turned out that way.
Where were you when it happened?
Yeah. But yeah, we're a bit like the moon landings. We don't seem to have gone back, right? We've not really moved on from that point.
There's questions if it ever happened.
Yeah,
I agree with all of that.
But look, this next clip, this is probably my favorite moment, and it's got nothing to do with fintech. So a guest called Neil Cross, who at the time he was a board director at Razor when they were looking to build a digital bank proposition. Yep. Really great guy. He was like chief innovation officer at DBS Bank in Singapore. But we talked about his career and his early career, and it was the most. I think I've just got to play it, right? I just can't explain it.
So, I grew up very, very poor in England. I had a great childhood, but fortunately my dad left when I was young. And, that's like, kind of government housing.
Been there.
Yeah, that did mean that, I was quite a smart kid and got my first computer at 11 and, just loved programming. So started programming literally straight away, ended up co-wrote quite a few successful computer games on the ZX Spectrum. So Andy Cap and GI Hero back in the day, back in the 80s. Yeah. And
so I used to have the Andy Cap game.
Successful. And then, I left school after I got my GCSEs and I wanted to do something different. So I spent a lot of time in tech.
Child prodigy.
So I kind of retired and ended up learning ninjutsu, so the art of the ninja, which, obvious, quite a common career path, that one. And, but in fairness, mainly involved dressing up in black and running around the woods at night, with homemade weapons. That's what you do when you're 16, climbing over people's roofs and stuff.
I feel like we're kindred spirits here, Neil. It was just took me right back to my childhood. I had a mate who used to do exactly that, right? We'd dress up in kind of camouflage gear at night and go on and chuck like Chinese ninja stars and stuff. At the stadium, the field at the top.
Close quarter combat. So that was quite interesting. And it was good fun. You wouldn't look at me now. Look at me now, you'd probably think a bit of a kung fu panda in fairness. I'm still lightning quick, so be careful. And so anyway, so I did that, and then and then I had a life change. My grandmother passed, and I was very, very close to her, and she always wanted me to be, really successful in my career, and it really made me stop and think, okay, and now coming up to 30. So I joined a division of Dun & Bradstreet, moved to London, and writing the software for their business credit scoring.
Mate, incredible.
What a journey.
So he kind of went on to Microsoft after that, and then DBS, and now got his own fintech, and just it was just one of those kind of such a natural conversation, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about the show is it not to be scripted, and just people just sharing their story.
That's out there as one of one of the more interesting in terms of different stories. That's for sure.
So we're kind of coming to the I guess the end of the show, Ryan.
How do we wrap this up, Dexter?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I should be on the front foot here in terms of where do we take it, in terms of wrapping this all up, in terms of the good, the bad, the ugly of what's happened over the last 4 years.
Yeah, look, it's, I think I kind of just, touched on that a bit. I think that, the podcast has just been amazing in so many ways. Totally never intended it to be 4 years here, 300 and odd interviews, over 150 founders, nearly 500,000 downloads, 40 countries listened to or more. Thanks to our friends who cheated on the People's Choice Awards.
Didn't hurt the numbers, did it?
It wasn't that big. It was just in terms of all the random places.
It wasn't 490,000. You're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't. But yeah, look, it's just. I think there's just been so many amazing things. I go to an event now, or walk in the street and people stop me and say, "Hey, how are you?" And I say we're friends, and I don't know who they are, and
they're asking for your autograph or what?
It's not so much that. It's just the intimacy, right? That how people kind of consume the podcast is it might be on a Saturday morning walking the dog, or they're at the gym. And some people have been listening for, the whole 4 years, right? And this familiarity that they have with me, it's incredible, right? Like, to think that people can just tune into your podcast and feel that they know you, and they kind of got this bond with you. So that's something that every time that somebody comes up and introduces themselves, I'm just kind of really blown away. And then, look, it's brought in clients, it's brought in business, it's brought in connections. It's, it's done so many beneficial things. It's just, it has been and continues to be a real gift.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite a beautiful thing in terms of you've taken a big step with what a lot of people wouldn't necessarily do. And what you put out there into the universe is equally what you take back in. So, mate, fair play to you. And I haven't given you much kudos on this. Tried to give you a bit of a grilling. It wasn't that hard, was it?
Yeah.
But genuinely, I'm sure I'm not the only person that says this, but for everything you do in terms of the industry, there's very few of you out there, and it genuinely does mean a lot to the ecosystem, to the founders, to the their supporters, that somebody's there trying to champion their work. Yep. So, mate, please keep it going. And here's to the next 4 years and the next major milestone to 1 million downloads.
And look, and I think this is the kind of important thing about it, right? What I think the bit that has, and the feedback that I get is, that really makes the difference to me is the fact that we've now got this archive of, the last 4 years of Australian fintech that people can tap into. Look, now we're going to come up with a guest and an example that I think kind of shows the other side of that. When Dom from Fast came on the show, and
he came yes, he
yeah,
did.
look, and I mean, it's such a high profile blowout. Look, but let's listen to it. I think I just came out of nowhere, right? And I got an email saying, "Hey, we've just raised $120 million, and here's an Aussie in San Fran. Do you want him on the show?" And I thought, wow, this is amazing. So, what a great example. But let's hear from Dom. Feels like you've just come out of nowhere. It's, do you want to tell? And on that note, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about Fast?
Yeah, definitely. So Fast is the one-click checkout for the entire internet. With no passwords. And so it's a button that says fast checkout that e-commerce stores and websites implement, and they put it on their website so that when you click it, you instantly buy whatever you're looking at. So no need to fill in, 10 minutes of checkout forms and scramble to remember a password or input your credit card details and have to go get your wallet from the next room. It's literally one click.
And frictionless, Dexter.
From the point you're looking
frictionless.
at. So,
frictionless, indeed. Frictionless,
the fastest and easiest way to buy online.
I think he was democratizing checkouts.
Sounds about right.
And launched Fast Login to the world. And I incorporated it as an American business from day one. Always figured that I would base the company in the US.
Smart.
Specifically, San Francisco is based on its concentration of capital for startups and network scale businesses and talent. And talent is really important. Yeah. So, in total, in the last, we're, about coming up to 2 years old. So incorporated in March. It's so almost 2 years old, and we've raised about 124 million odd US dollars. And
that we just that you've raised it from as well, right?
Hold on, I need to get my calculator out.
Absolutely. We can sort of get into each round, but our last round was a $102 million round led by Stripe. It's our Series B. We raised, we announced it about a month ago, and frankly, there isn't a they led the round. They're just, aren't Australian-based VCs who would write those sort of checks, right?
200 million AUD.
Mate.
Sorry, I just want to check what the actual current exchange rate was. 200 million AUD.
Mate. So you can see why I was like, get on the show, right? Like, we got to show people, hey, look, there's another way you can do this, right? Like, get a code to the US, raise that money.
Oh, my God. $200 million, 2 years? How much longer after...
12 months, literally 12 months from being on the show, they shut the doors.
That's some journey into it.
And they just raised that money.
Yeah.
So literally then, the announcement had been made that week, and that's why he was on the show.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's been a lot of narratives kind of over the last 2-3 years in terms of wartime, peacetime. It's a lot of money to be burning through in a very short window of time. Quite an incredible journey. And I think one for other founders, obviously, to learn from in terms of like, how do you build a sustainable business that's there for ideally the long term, whilst also, you need to be balanced with this. What you're being asked to do in terms of building any startup, frankly, defies logic. And whatever number you look out at in terms of media, the failure rates of startups are huge. It's just unusual if you've raised that much money to also fail at the same time within such a short window. And I think that's probably the little wrinkle between it all. But just a fascinating thing in terms of looking at and just trying to understand what actually happened. And
I get founders who started the business because they listened to the podcast and some people inspired them.
Yeah.
I got people who got hired because they listened to a podcast and reached out to the founder and they connected. I got clients who won investment. I got clients who won customers who, they listened to the podcast and connected. So I think that's the kind of thing that I've found has just been, the greatest impact. Yeah. The friends I've made, it's like, I think the friendship that I've made with Simone Joyce at, Fintech Australia, Paper Plane, when, we first got together.
Great things she's done.
Yeah. And look, she's just she's a real inspiration to me. She's just an incredible human being. And I think, but really important, we'll kind of listen to Simone, but, when I think back to, the kind of first podcast that we did together and then the one that we've done most recently, which is, look, I got quite emotional, actually. I'm going to play it.
I am going to miss you, which is weird, right? Because you're in Brisbane. I'm in Newcastle.
I know, you're in Newcastle.
We only ever see each other at Intersect anyway.
Right. Well, I'll see you at Intersect next.
But you're going to be in North America, so I don't know why that's making a difference, but somehow it is. I think what it's down to is, first of all, I know what it's like to give everything up and start again in a new country. And I think second of all, you're just somebody who I really consider a friend, and it's just fantastic to see, you and your mission and your family and your business just going from strength to strength. And that's a reason why I dub you the superwoman of fintech.
Oh, Dexter, thank you. I'm going to miss you too. Sure, and if you ever feel like a little holiday to New York, I will be personally offended if you don't look me up and ask if I can accommodate you.
It could very well be on the cards. We'll have to do a Fintech Chatter live from New York.
On a Saturday.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, it'd be Sunday for Aussies, won't it?
Yeah, I just want to be able to say live from New York, it's Fintech Chatter.
Madison Square Gardens.
I mean, I'm big, right?
We'll stand outside.
There you go.
I might just get it back.
But I think that the kind of friendships that have come from the show has just been incredible and continue to be incredible as well.
Yeah, I mean, being on the other side of the fence here, and being somebody as a student of history, in terms of doing the role, in terms of building startups or being part of building startups, the ability to stand on the shoulder of giants and learn from failures, successes, and we've covered a few of them today. It's actually really important. And in all honesty, there aren't many archives of just people being really vulnerable and just talking about the realities of things. You tend to see is the superficial highlights. The real on whatever social media platform it would be. You don't hear about all the crap that goes on. And actually that is the stuff which is invaluable. If you can learn from it and if you can take it on. Obviously it's always different being in another person's shoes, but just what are the things that you could take on to help guide you to try and avoid when you go on your own journey? And there aren't many archives like that in terms of ones that are relevant to fintech founders in Australia.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to a wrap up, Ryan. So thanks for joining me. Where can people find out more about Cape?
Great question. Well, get over to the website. So simply getcape.io. Or you can come find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there from time to time. I'm actually on any of the social media sites these days. Put them all out. But yeah, you'll find me there. Just look me up, Ryan Edwards-Pritchard.
Awesome. And I just want to thank you for listening, folks. I just, again, can't believe we're 4 years on from that first episode. If you've tuned in to all 300 and odd episodes or 4-year anniversary, if you've tuned in to any of the 300 episodes, I just want to thank you so much for your support. If you are new to the show, make sure to give us a follow, subscribe, and go and have a look through the back catalogue. There's some amazing podcasts in there and some amazing guests. You can connect with me, Dexter Cousins, on LinkedIn. And until the next episode, keep well.
Fintech Chatter is produced by Tier 1 people, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll find world-class leadership talent to build world-class fintech ventures. And you can find us at tier1people.com.